Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And here is our latest episode, and it is Event Horizon, a cult classic.
So yes, we return to our must-see horror feature.
We do.
Going through the poster that we've got. And Event Horizon was the choice. This was the first time I've seen this film. What about you?
Yeah, this was the first time I had seen. This is one of those films that plays on, like, here in the UK for UK viewers, like Channel 5 used to play this film like several times, like all of the time. I used to see it on like late at night and things like this. So I think I'd seen like little parts of it, but I'd never actually committed to sit down and watch the whole thing, kind of thing.
I remember my older brother Dan talking about it. And I think he brought it on DVD maybe, but I never got around to watching it. So I was familiar with it and like the concept of it, but I never actually sat down and watched it.
No, and I was always intrigued by it because it's got a great cast, and I always looked at it going like, this is a banging cast, and like I like the idea of it. And although I will admit that I think whenever I'd seen it, I'd never realised that this was so much of a horror film. I was thinking more of a sci-fi kind of on a ship kind of, that kind of thing. I never realised it was quite the kind of gothic horror that we've got here.
Yeah, it's very, the simplest way to put it is it's like it's a ghost ship film.
Yeah.
Set in space,
Yeah, it's literally, to me, it felt like Hellraiser and Evil Dead put on a ship, basically, for certain scenes. Like, the inspiration felt very strong for those two films.
Yeah, I definitely get Hellraiser. There is a lot of similar imagery and even some themes which I think I could definitely see Hellraiser. I'm trying to think, there was a film that I did feel it was also quite similar to, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I think the main thing that I was hesitant about is poor W.S. Anderson. Having watched all the Resident Evil films and Alien vs Predator, and being familiar with him through that.
I mean, I can come straight out of the gate and say that this is his best film.
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, if you look at his track record, he's got Mortal Kombat films, he's got Resident Evil, he's got Monster Hunter, he's got Death Race with Jason Statham. I mean, he's consistently not a strong director. He makes films that feel cheap and disposable, I gotta be honest.
I'd admit that.
It's not that I don't have a love for certain kinds of those films. I haven't enjoyed those kind of films as throwaway popcorn, but they are the most throwaway kind of popcorn. It's almost. It feels. I feel sorry for saying that he's almost like the cheap man's Michael Bay or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yes, he kind of almost is. He's the poor man's Michael Bay.
But here's the weird thing in talking about his back catalogue is I was sat through this film going, shit, you know what? This guy would make a really great Resident Evil film. Sorry, Resident Evil Dead, not Evil Dead. This guy would make an awesome Resident Evil Dead. He's got a film here which has got... It looks lit properly. It's slow and suspenseful in certain scenes. It's over the top and violent in other scenes. It's got a little cheesy layer to it, but not too much. Like, I was just like, this director would make a great Resident Evil film. And then I was just like, what the fuck happened to the actual Evil Dead? Why I keep mixing those up in my head. Resident Evil film. What the hell happened?
I know.
Like, how did he go from like this gothic kind of dark, kind of suspenseful and kind of religious kind of overtones, and yes, kind of occasionally little hammy performances, but in the right way and
it works.
And over the top, and then to go from that to what he actually made into a Resident Evil film is just like what? Because this was like, I think there was only ever a film or another film in between this one and Resident Evil, and it's just like, how did you go from this, which sounds like a real passion project for him as well? Like, this film's like, this, like, there's meant to be a director's cut of this, or like, I don't know if it's actually been released, I don't think, but he does say that there's his cut of the film which is much more on the gothic horror side, and then there's the version that he got, because basically, critics hated and mauled this film.
Yeah, and it failed at the box office.
And not only that, the studio itself kind of seemed to imply, and he himself has said, throughout, like Thomas W.S. Anderson has said throughout, that they basically, like, once they saw a cut of it, they hated it and were just like, fuck this film. Like, they made him cut, like, a lot of the gothic kind of violence out of it. They said it was too over the top, it was too grotesque, it was horrid. There's an orgy, almost bloody orgy kind of scene in this film, which is like, you think is them getting massacred, but then you think it's a bloody orgy, and then it kind of looks almost sexual in some way. And he said that was way, like, those scenes were way longer and way more aggressive, and things like that. And
but
they just made him cut it out. Like,
and it's a shame because I mean, I was genuinely surprised with how good this film was. Yeah, but you think that it could have been so much better had they kept in all of those additional elements. I think I read like 30 minutes of footage was completely destroyed.
Yeah, it's and that it's one of the odd problems that that you get straight away, because I think this is a film where you don't quite know what to expect. Even though it's been out for so long, like I said, like, if I'm watching it at certain points, I'm thinking that this is a completely different film than it is. It does feel a bit like a film that's been cut up. Like, or they've added in scenes that are more action heavy, or more just like character based, or kind of funny, and then remove scenes that were more grotesque. And because almost a lot of the horror and stuff almost seems like you're almost surprised at how graphic it is in certain scenes, because it's not that heavy on it. Yeah, but it's like there. It's like you had that, and like it's not there, and it almost lowers your expectations within the film.
Well, one of the things that I picked up on almost immediately. Let's just get straight into the meat and bones. And as always, if this is your first time listening, or if you just forgot, then make sure to hit the subscribe button. I got to get that in there before we set sail. One of the things that kind of struck me straight away. I don't know if you noticed this, but it's very prevalent of 90s sci-fi. It's very industrial and muted. Like 70s stuff was almost struck me as very like clean. You know, if you're thinking of like 2001 Space Odyssey, it's all like white, and even Aliens to an extent is quite clean. And then 80s sci-fi is very like bright and futuristic. And then the 90s, it's all very like grunge.
Yeah, it is proper grunge. They've embraced the Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, it's all like muted colours and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's dark and kind of gritty or rusted. It looks like they've been on the ship for like a long time, or the ship's been used for a long time.
Yeah,
it definitely. It feels like I'm trying. My head going blank for some reason. I even feel like a lot of the Alien sequels that were more 90s have a much more look and feel like this than they do maybe the original Alien.
Especially the third one. That was in prison.
Fincher's.
Well, you know,
he will say, "How dare you?"
Yeah,
I directed none of that. But yeah, that's what I mean. Like, quite a lot of sci-fi in the 90s had this kind of feel to it. It was a darker, grittier time.
Yeah, and speaking of dark, gritty film with from the 90s sci-fi, obviously The Matrix, with Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
I thought a lot of that aesthetic was popularised by it, but this was before.
Yeah, 1997. Before that was 99, I think.
Yeah,
Matrix. Yeah,
and if you could, there were a lot of the scenes, especially when they're on the what's the Lewis and Clark?
Yeah,
when they're on the Lewis and Clark, which is very much, it's quite similar to when they're out in the real world in the Matrix. They're not eating fucking slop and stuff like that, but it is still quite similar. And one thing that I picked up on in Event Horizon that I really liked at the start was it kind of felt a bit Aliens-ish. How all of the boys had kind of like,
it felt a bit
how
more
the
like a team of Marines or things like that.
Yeah,
like they're on a mission. Yeah. No, I definitely get that. There was even down to be honest, the Aliens kind of part even goes down to when we go down to like the core, the black hole of the Event Horizon. It kind of reminds me of when they're all going into the pods in Aliens. The classic when they all get killed inside of that one pod, and it's in the very similar kind of room, like in the middle of like a large space like that. Yeah, it definitely reminded me of that kind of sphere kind of. And that's what I was trying to figure in my head. There's a film called Sphere, which is another 90s film, and there's another one like The Astronauts What, and these were all very like about like space trips and stuff like that kind of go wrong, or some kind of clash, or species or things like that.
Yeah.
All of these 90s ones, they all had this very similar aesthetic. It was all about the creatures that could go wrong, or the body horror that could go wrong within these kind of space trips. They'd gone away from the almost... It wasn't so much about the exploring, it was more about the real deadly things that could go wrong within space, or
humans
the kind
fucking things up.
Well, basically, it took Alien and basically went, right, what can we do? What other ghost stories can we do on board? Basically, what kind of that kind of thing, like haunted house, as they always said with the original Alien, and they kept taking that and kept digging into that deeper, including the whole, it's the early 1990s, with before 99, but early 90s. And we've got the special effects, which at some parts look really like, I was like, oh, this is not bad, and then some parts look really bad.
Yeah, some part. The main part that I noticed was, because I actually put in my notes that some of the CGI is actually okay, seeing as how it is nearly, I don't even, my maths is bad, but maybe like 30 years old, But then you get scenes like the goo, when the gravity portal, gravity drive, whatever, first opens up, and we see like the goo floating.
Yeah,
it's that kind of looks a bit outdated, But then I think that's one of the problems with CGI is eventually, like, it can look good at the time, but then in 15, 20 years time, it's hard to say what ages.
This is the thing, and it's what made me think about the difference in the that feels different about his directing style in this than it is in others. And I feel like you get across of a lot of the bad shots are him trying to overdo it, and a lot of the good shots are when he's going smaller and he's going more with the tight and close spaces of the ship.
Yeah.
And it makes it feel small. And then when you've got any special effects, it kind of works because it feels more practical, it feels more closer. When he tries to do these big outside shots of the ship, when it's just like, you just haven't got the technology for this. So he's trying to do these big winding around, and there's something about them that just, like, those shots are the ones that kind of give away a certain, like, kind of what he gives away in his other films, in Resident Evil, in Death Race, and all these kind of ones where he tries for these big shots, but the effects just aren't there good enough, that he's trying to show it off. But that's kind of what made him kind of cheap director, because he just wants all of these big CGI shots, not the practical.
Yeah.
The best part of Event Horizon is actually the ship.
Oh,
the actual practical work that's gone into the details on the ship are really nice. And it's ruined when he does these like 20-second shots outside of the ship, and it's like, why? There's no reason to be showing the outside.
I kind of
agree.
agree.
Once we're on the ship, we don't need to see the outside, but he keeps doing these like outward big shots and all these kind of wider shots, and it's kind of like, you didn't really need these shots. Like, cut that shit, man.
I'm guessing for me, that's us watching it now. Like, at the time, it might have been really
at the
impressive.
time,
like, you might have been like, oh wow, that in mind-boggling 3D. Like, the first time I ever saw Neo dodging those bullets, I was like shitting my pants. You know what I mean?
That's different, like 2 years later, but I know for a fact, like, having watched the Matrix special effects hold up way... Not the sequels,
yeah, some of them.
Not the sequels, but the first one's special effects hold up much better, and they have some, they have the creatures inside, and the monsters that come after them, and they all hold up pretty damn well compared to say this. So it does, I think it all does depend on this was the difference between, say, the Matrix and then the sequels. Is the Matrix, they took their time, they well built it, they built the practical effects to go with it. They blended practical and CGI, which is always the best use of special effects. When you try to create things purely out of nothing, it tends to be pretty shitty. Like, it doesn't hold up at all. Like, that's the difference you have, and that's the difference you have in, say, the Matrix sequel, when we can say, there's not so great CGI. Because they rushed it, because they were like, here's a hit, let's bang out like 2 more, let's make them quick. Like that kind of thing. And like in this film, it just is like that constant mix where like it gets better later in the film when it goes away from these kind of things. But early on, when you're doing like character scenes, these sci-fi films always seem to feel this need to kind of let's just have a pop on the outside, just to remind everyone we're still in space. We're still in space. We haven't changed.
It is a bit
I don't want you to start thinking this isn't a space movie. They haven't returned home. We're still in space. Like, we just keep having to pop outside just to show.
It is a bit that. But I think I think the crux of the story is it's a really interesting story. I think it hooks you pretty early. We get them all kind of boarded on the ship. We get Sam Neill, who is Dr. William Weir, but I'm just going to call him Sam Neill. We get like his weird ass dream where he sees his wife with the eyes cut out, and I think for a film which is effectively a ghost ship film, you know, I think it hooks you in really well. I think the idea is quite interesting.
The whole lost crew on the Event Horizon and what happened to them, and the shot and the scenery with those kind of gothic, like the person with the scars all over his body, the crosses that you see, you know, all those kind of shots you get with Sam Neill, his wife, with you know, just walking in like eyes out but nude, kind of walking in with him like against her kind of thing, and it's all very odd, but this is the kind of stuff of why I was like, this is far more interesting than stuff I've seen from you before, because it's literally like it's quite, to start with, the film is quite slow and suspenseful, whereas with this director I was expecting it to hit into the action really fast. It actually takes its while to build, which I was surprised by, because there's a certain kind of holding back with that kind of thing, you know, and you know, the fact that we kind of get time for all the pieces to fall in place. Some people might have found it almost too slow for some people. Maybe, I'd say,
because it is. I think. Sorry to cut in you, but cut it. But on the pacing, it is. You know, I just read it's 96 minutes long. Yeah, but it is paced relatively well, I think. Like, there is that fear, especially knowing where Paul Anderson's work went, that it does just kind of jump into things quite quickly, but it takes its time to actually play out.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously get from early on that Sam Neill, as I was just calling it that.
Yeah, I was just calling him
Sam Neill is just is not quite in the right place mentally. That there's obviously something. Obviously straight away we know there's something to do with his wife and things like that, and a lot of it's all teased, and not all of it is really fully explained. Obviously, maybe it would have been, but it's not fully explained in many ways. But we know there's something, as in like a dead wife, like she's killed herself, or like I think we have a bathtub scene, don't we, which implies that
we get a bathtub later on.
So no, straight away we're kind of, and Sam Neill kind of, I feel like, is the one that kind of holds a lot of this on his shoulders at times. Yeah, like he's going fully at it in this, and it's very easy. I don't know why, but I like, even though he's been in loads, I always forget Sam Neill is quite like, he's done a lot of horror. Yeah, but I forget that, like, he was Damien in the original sequels to The Omen and
Possession.
Yeah,
and in the Mouths of Madness.
Yeah, he did that Daywalkers, and you know, he's done a range of different ones where he's actually been, you know, and obviously, you know, you've even got to say, you know, he's the good guy now, but his Jurassic Park is still quite, you know, on that vibe.
Yeah, a lot of people do just unfortunately associate him with just Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
but I guess when you're in Jurassic Park, it's kind of hard to not be.
No, but that's what I mean. Like, and I've always, everything I've seen him in, I've always really enjoyed him as an actor, like, kind of thing. But he does kind of feel. It always feels like he's very underrated. He's been around a long time, but it always feels like he's never been that, like, go-to kind of actor kind of thing in that way. Like, even though he led pretty much one of the biggest films of all time and was pretty much the focal main character of that in a big way. But it always reminds me, like, I remember with, like, Sam Neill, a weird, like, thing that popped into my head when I was watching this was, I remember back when I was in school, this was back in the day when I would have seen this film like 20 times and never actually watched it on Channel 5. But like back in the day, like, this is all the way back in primary school, and I remember I remember reading online that, like, Sam Neill was like rumoured to be playing Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
So this is like way back then. Like, he was the one rumoured, and I remembered all that, like, shit that you have with that, and being like, like, you see, even back then thinking, like, he wasn't a guy who got his due. You know what I mean? Like, but this is like back in the, this is weird. This is a memory that's survived in my head. I literally remember sitting in a computer suite at my primary school, and this is back here, you know, this is like early 2000s kind of thing, which is like a case of, like, this isn't like secondary school, this is primary school. This is like, they've got like They've got like shitty computers.
Yeah.
And this is the early age of the internet when half of them didn't have it. So the fact that you were getting on the internet was like a big thing in your school. I just remember like, why does my brain remember being sat in primary school slowly waiting for the internet to load entertainment news about Sam Neill playing... And yeah, I'm just thinking of all the shit that's happened, all the shit I've probably done to my body, and yet somehow that memory survived. Just a random Sam Neill fact in my head. I literally, it was random shit like that. I remember reading the entertainment news and telling other people that Sam Neill's going to be Doc Ock, and probably no one had a fucking clue who that was, because that's the kind of nerd
Sam
I was.
Neill.
And then and apart from that, it was and I even remember another fact that I read, which was what was it? Back in the day of the early days for Lost.
Oh yeah,
Lost and whatever, and like the second season of Lost, and they showed a picture of a guy, and they said that was Hurley, the character, the big guy Hurley in the show.
Hurley.
And they said he'd lost like a shit ton of weight, when it turned out to be a completely different character. But back then they said the actor had lost like literally gone from like this huge guy to this tiny guy.
Lad,
yeah, and I don't know why these memories exist in my brain, but they're so fucking random.
These core memories.
Just me thinking I was the coolest kid ever, like on my computer in a primary school, like I'm finding out all the gossip that no one knows.
Yeah,
but it's weird, like. That was the world we lived in, where that actually wasn't so available. Like now, like it's like everyone's seen it a million times. Back then, that was like, I've actually gone and found the goss. I found that information. But yeah, I don't know where that tangent came from in my brain. I was just thinking of the cast, and then Sam Neill just popped into my head. Why is that a core memory in my brain? I need to delete that memory. But this has got a stacked cast.
Oh man, the cast is awesome. Fishburne is great. Sean Pertwee.
Jason Isaacs, the classic, and Natasha Redgrave, who's Rip. She died.
Rip,
yeah. She was
when did she
Liam
die?
Neeson's wife.
Oh yeah,
she's Liam Neeson's wife. She died. It was quite a while ago now. I feel like it was back in like 2010 or something.
I vaguely
It's
remember.
been a long time ago. Yeah, she died with a skiing accident. She skiing down a hill, hit her head and bang.
Fucking hell, right?
She did a Sonny Bono.
Yeah,
damn. I just read. I was like, Liam Neeson's what I popped in my head. I was just watching it, going like, I remember her being in a lot of 90s kind of things, like I think she's in The Parent Trap, and I think she's a lot of 90s based cinema. 101 Dalmatians and all these classic films that I'm reeling off here, but I just remember her being like a popular star, and it was like, oh shit, like you don't expect someone at such a young age to go, but yes.
No, you don't, man. But no, it was an absolute stacked cast, man.
Well, this is the best cast that this director ever worked with, by far. I keep wanting to mix him up in my head, because I've always did like. I mix up his name because he's Paul W.S. Anderson, and then there's Paul Thomas Anderson, and Paul Thomas Anderson has made such great films as like. There Will Be Blood, and you know what I mean, like Magnolia, and like literally like almost every film he makes is pretty much critically acclaimed. And then you've got another guy with a very similar name, and I used to mix them up. And at one point, I think I thought that the same director had done both. I was like, this guy is
very inconsistent.
Wildly inconsistent. Like this guy is like he goes from working with Daniel Day-Lewis in one film to then working with his wife Mila Djokovic. This is the other thing that pops in my head. I believe that he got married to Mila Djokovic after this film, and all I was thinking in my head, going like, "Is that what Mila Djokovic does to you?"
Yeah,
like obviously you want to get with Mila Djokovic, and then at the same time, it's also like you will get this woman for life, but she will destroy your creativity.
Yeah,
she will take all of it out of you.
It's just like Rob Zombie.
Yeah, not being able to not put Sherry Moon in the film.
And to an extent, Tim Burton with Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter.
Yes.
Maybe their friendships just found on like, I'll make you look cool, but I have to be in every single project you ever do. You know?
Yeah. Except, luckily for Tim Burton, they work out better.
They work out better.
He's got two fantastic actors, whereas Sherry Moon,
Sherry Moon could be
actor. I think is a strong word to put into her category.
Oh, she could be hit and miss.
Mila Djokovic is better, can be better, has been better, But
There's also been worse.
yeah, I feel like them as a pair just is not a great match.
No, definitely.
I feel like this husband and wife should not work together.
No. But no, it is a banging cast. And there's loads of... I think like the characters that we get are relatively... They all suffer from, aliens syndrome in a way in which, like...
Yeah.
I don't know if it was so much before Aliens came out, but they're like, oh yeah, you just got to have loads of banter. But it's kind of class. So there was a line from, I think it's Cooper, who says, would you like something hot and black inside of you? And it's just, like, he has so many puns, and there are lines like Sean Pertwee, fuck layman's terms, do you speak English? After Sam Neill explains how the event horizon works. Which is a really cool idea. And I actually remember my brother giving me the exact same explanation after he'd watched it. That's like the one thing that's stuck in my head is that instead of, going from like one point to the other, fold time and just go through,
That was one of the things that surprised me again in this film, and this is actually one of the reasons that people it has such a cult following in many ways, is because this film actually seems like whoever wrote the script or have actually taken the time to actually look at it, because this is an actual scientific theory. This is real theory. This isn't like made up like horse shit on film. This is like proper.
Really?
This is proper like Stephen Hawking, the idea of folding in time and time being relative, and the way that you'd break through. It's the same concepts used with Christopher Nolan in Interstellar and stuff like that. The idea that you can break through the kind of thing. It's used in a lot of films like that you actually have later. But yeah, this is what I was surprised to see, an actual they've actually taken real scientific theory to break this through, instead of just making up like we've made a black hole and it works through there. The idea that you could bend time through like a black hole and stuff like that. The whole time and relativity is actually correct scientific, like in many ways. Like I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's actually correct.
Like,
and I've seen a lot of people that say they like the fact that this film actually seems to have had a lot of that. So between the writing being like quite funny in one way, but that also again shows how wildly a bit inconsistent this film is, that it's got like some much more serious kind of ideas, and then it's got some more kind of slightly more cheesy kind of trying to be a little bit more of that actiony kind of one at the same time. And it balances, luckily for the most part. It doesn't like fall apart like I would have expected it to. Like when it was happening early on in the film, I was thinking that I feel if this keeps going this way, I feel like this is going to be wildly just completely the whole time. Luckily it goes more into the serious as the film goes later on.
I think it marries the two quite well, because it does have some, really interesting themes. I mean, if you're looking at the sci-fi in general, especially like 90s sci-fi, seemed to be very dystopian, very industrial. It wasn't, like you said, it's no more are we talking about like exploring space, but now it's more that space is being explored and it's just like your life, and you have to live on a ship and fucking you're still doing like menial tasks, and we're still very much in the same.
This is the world now, basically.
This is the world now. It's still the same.
It's
as
just
it was
moving
on
like all Mad Max onto a ship, basically.
It's just that kind of vibe. But then you've got, as we discover later, religious themes within the film, kind of the almost like you said, Hellraiser-ish ideas of different planes or realms of reality. And I think it does run the risk of being either too serious and kind of not being not fun, or just being too hammy and campy. But I think it marries it quite well.
Yes, that's what I mean. Somehow it does marry. So there's because even if we just take Sam Neill's character alone, there is both a seriousness to his character, which could have felt like he was just put into like a standard role, but then he gets to veer into this slightly campier kind of part at times. Almost when he goes a little bit more evil turn, it starts to feel the slightest bit campy, not in a totally bad way.
No.
But it takes him away from the more serious, because he's pretty much the straight man most of the time.
Yeah, he is.
But there's that there's that veil underneath of like that he's hiding a dark secret or that he's not quite sure.
Yeah.
But as he starts to go more and more into that, the film almost starts to go into that like gothic but slightly campy kind of area.
Yeah.
Where it's like you're not quite sure, and that gives it a little realm of fun.
Yeah,
at the same time.
He felt very like Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, I see what you mean, yeah.
It was more like theatrical as opposed to, I don't know, as opposed to being too...
When he's around a lot of them, in the space that he seems very serious, but the second he's away, there's almost like the little like twirling of the mustache.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it kind of felt really cool. I loved when they actually boarded the Event Horizon, trying to stick kind of loosely to the plot. We get a little bit of, as you do in pretty much every film, you get the Chekhov's gun where they're like, oh, this is the bridge. Yeah, this is how the ship's going to destroy itself. Yeah, and I was like looking, and I was like, I'm surprised like Sam Neill didn't look at the camera and wink. It's very like, well, that's what's going to happen.
This is how this is going to play out.
This is how it's going to play out.
Let's just lay that out for the audience.
But then when they actually got in there, and the kind of they're looking around, and there's a scene where I think it might be two of the women who are researching, or a woman and a man, I can't quite remember, and they say like, oh, we got like a little bit of blood in here, or there's like there's signs of a massacre. And then as they walk off, like you said, when they're first on Event Horizon, when they first board, it's very dark, they haven't really got the powers on, but then we see some light come in, and all the wall up behind them is just covered in viscera and guts and blood, and it's that the whole section is really creepy. That's what really well done. The light. That's what like. This is one of those. The lighting in this film is just fantastic. The little beams of light that come through. Really, I was just like a lot of them. I was looking at a lot of the shots, going like, these are really good shots. These are really like interesting, revealing, just the right amount. That's that early suspense that we kind of get in the film of just kind of, oh, where's this going? I feel like you are properly intrigued as where it's going. But a lot of those shots kind of I found really interesting. And again, I feel like I'm over egging this purely because of the director it is. I haven't seen him do shots like this that aren't just big, bright CGI kind of, even Resident Evil. God no. Even Resident Evil. I mean, that's such a... For what it should be, like... Yeah. When you think back of it, you think of Resident Evil, the first game, and you go, like basically, these shots of these, like, lights and this darkness and this grime and texture, that is, like, the exact exterior that I'd expect to see in a Resident Evil film. And yet the one he made was bright neon lights and white rooms, and you know what I mean? Like, they literally the complete opposite of what it should have been. It really is. It's like they're directed by two different people. Yeah. But I think even when they're on there, we get somebody has a great line where they're like, "This place is a tomb," and then we actually get a really, really good like jump scare. Isn't this around the time that we get the? Because obviously we've got the bodies that are partially contained by the floating body around, and then we get it's not too long till we get the drop, is it? The slight gravity drop. Yeah, that's they all explode on the ground, which I was like, that's a fucking awesome shot. Oh mate, it was awesome. But when those body parts just hit the ground and you literally see a kind of, yes, it's still ice, but it has a kind of, it's still the circuit. Like I've seen this happen in several films, but the circuit about this one, they've taken it to break into such tiny pieces that even though it's ice, it still felt like blood splatter at the same time. Yeah, I was just like, oh, that's badass. It was fucking. The whole of the exploring the Event Horizon was awesome, and the actual gravity drive itself. I don't know if you got this. I don't know if it's just me spending too much time on the internet, or if it was intentional. But the gravity drive looks to me like a biblical angel. I didn't get that, but I can kind of see what you mean now. Thinking of the shot, like I can see how you're. I can see the kind of like it's this aura, kind of like the aura around it, like the aura around it. Yeah. So like the biblical angel, and then you've got like as like a sphere kind of thing, and then like that. I realised I just showed you something on an audio podcast.
You're showing me that clip. Here you go.
Yeah, Google biblical angel and go 6 pictures.
Go look at it because we can't show you.
Yeah,
maybe we'll post a picture of a biblical angel.
But like if you look at that, it is very like this thing of like lights, which you could argue look like eyes, like kind of like warping around itself.
Yeah.
And it's got. I mean, maybe I am just spending too much time on the internet.
Well, no, like I can see what you mean, and again, this film is filled with religious subtext, throughout it. Some of it obvious, and some of it not so obvious, kind of thing. The whole has a sacrifice, almost like flailing, the scars, the cuts, the sins that are kind of shown, and all of these kind of different areas. You've got a lot of religious subtext here, but then at the same time, it in that same kind of gothic way, you've even got the actual unit itself kind of also looks a little bit like medieval, almost armor, kind of like in its kind of way. It
has that that industrial feel.
Yeah, it does. Like it feels. It does make you think about like the time that these were made and how long has this been here, and all those little touches they just really help that kind of suspense build up.
Yeah,
like it really. The almost the strongest part, as I said before, is almost the practical design of the ship, because the ship almost tells its own story.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess it. I think it goes back.
It does,
to it does, yeah.
In a literal way, but in another way, like visually, you're like,
yeah,
look at this.
I think the visual storytelling of the film is great, and it for me, there's some parts of the film that I felt were really strong, and they kind of thread together, which is why they jump through the film. But when we get the first bit of Latin, where DJ's like, I think it says "liberate us," so we gotta go and help these people. They get there, they realise that there's like something has fucking happened. They find the physical media, which is such an iconic thing in pre-internet films. Pre-internet sci-fi, it was like, it's on a floppy drive, it's on like a CD, and this is like the ship's like data log, and then we hear the data log.
Computer backup.
There's no computer backup.
It has to be this giant file that you pull out of one area and put into another area.
No cloud streaming, nothing. No routers. It's just like,
which is kind of it's weird in the same way that I prefer that physical. Like I actually prefer that in films when they've got instead of just having the explanation of yes, even though it's logical, it's like it's all just backed up in the cloud. Man.
Yeah, but that's it. I
want to see it.
My thing with sci-fi from whatever era is that it always ends up being exactly like it is in the time it was released. So in the 80s, everything like film set in the future, everybody's still dressed, and the technology, while still really advanced, is still basically the same, like running on the same system as in the 80s. Like when they made this film, they're like, it's set in 2047. Yeah. So they're like, it could be on anything, and they're like, it's obviously going to be on a CD in 40 years time. Come on, like how much more advanced can it get?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the whole aesthetic you get from there, like you've got almost like baseball jackets, leather jackets at the same time. Half of them dressed like, and then they've got looks and buzz cuts, but then at the same time you're just looking at it going, you basically just look like someone from Manchester in the 90s. Like Sean Pertwee. That's just the way you looked in the 90s. You had that kind of cut, and half the way that they're dressed or the way they act is just like, it's like, you're the whole baseball cap, almost like baseball jacket. Like they have that kind of aesthetic, and it's like that is such a 90s American look.
Exactly.
Not like that's not a futuristic look. That's just you've just taken your clothes and just been like, let's just do that. We'll still be dressing like this in when we get to 2047.
Yeah, I love that. But then it's the going back to the link that I was making. It is that they then listen to it, and it's like liberate yourself from hell, and then they realise just how fucked up everything is.
Yeah.
I realised that the tangent probably threw most people off what we were saying.
Is this so? Do we get the actual footage of this quick shots of what happens to them? Because I feel like they get a bit of it at first, then they have to clear it up, don't they? They have to do something like the old classic sci-fi. Old classic sci-fi. If it's not quite, I'm going to try and like clear up the image. Kind of
they
thing.
They do that because then in between everybody gets their own. Well, I think just
they don't want to quite. I don't think they want to show the crew just yet quite how bad a situation they might be in.
No, but they
how fucked up it's about to get.
Well, they get the classic like hallucinations. So we get I know Sam Neill's in the vents, which is a cool scene, and we get his wife. My favourite, I think, of them, because obviously Lawrence Fishburne has like somebody that he left behind on an order to die, a guy on fire. But my favourite is the woman who's like something's up with her son.
He's calling out to her.
And we get this fucking horrid scene in the med bay where they see like under a white sheet, and then she pulls it back and her kid's there, and then like she turns around and the kid's gone. And I think it is classic ghost ship story of everybody having hallucinations of the sins or whatever they've done in a life. But I like that it is cliche, but I like that it fleshes out the characters.
They do, yeah. It gives each person a little bit of more of a backstory, but also a bit more of a personality.
Yeah.
And it also, again, the main thing here as well is that again, on terms of the effects of the things that we see, the practical effects, they're strong. They are good. Like as you said, like the way that the sun looks fucked up, or Lawrence Fishburne's. The one on fire, I mean, fire's a hard one actually to pull off, but it looked really awesome. Yeah, every time you saw the guy on fire, it was like right up until like later in the film. Like you're literally looking at it like, actually that looks damn good. And fire is actually one of the things that even nowadays they still sometimes struggle to pull off.
Really
like
tricky.
Someone on fire looking actually good, but it does look strong. Like a lot of, and again, so we get a little bit of that body horror kind of coming in, which it adds a nice, it kind of keeps the horror fan at bay, I guess.
Yeah.
It gives you like nice little snippets of like the idea of what's to come. And yes, again, like we've said, there is some way you kind of, I wish there was a little bit more there, like at these scenes. I mean, not the whole film, I mean just at these scenes. Like sometimes they cut away a bit too fast, or you feel like they've almost been like limited on how grotesque they should be with it. Like there's more.
It would have been the cuts, I guess.
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely. I think,
and I think like body horror and cosmic horror pretty much go quite hand in hand.
Yeah,
you know. So I think it's, I don't know. I think it fleshes it out a little bit more. I don't know if like because it's not set on it's not set on a boat. Because it's in space, it's makes it cosmic horror. But I think like the idea of a different realm and the ship becoming sentient and people's sins catching up with them, and then this idea of like seeing things or particularly going to a place and then like a different realm and then coming back.
Yeah,
is just such a horrific thing. And I think cosmic horror is so hard to pull off.
Yeah, it is, because it's hard for it not to feel very samey. As we've already said, a lot of these can feel, and even at some points of this, it feels very similar to other ones. Like we said, like Alien 3, I could totally see in this film. Like there's a lot of similarities that you get with these films. So to make one stand out and feel different is quite a hard thing to do, which is kind of what's good about this one. That And the fact that we kind of take the characters through these journeys, I mean, that's what almost makes it more interesting, is the fact that we've got this conflict that adds to that suspense, that tension, because it's like which ones are actually going to give into it and believe it.
Yeah.
And that's where some of the deaths come from, obviously, is the fact that some of them give in. Like the lady with her son, she goes towards the
she goes after
black hole kind of blob. Yeah. Like black, that's where you get that CGI black blob kind of coming.
Yeah, well, she falls down the stairs, doesn't she?
Oh yeah, she falls through the. Yeah, who was it? Who was
Justin.
Up? Yeah,
Justin
gets taken into. Yeah, he does.
Yeah, and then I like the idea that he goes into the gravity drive, and then he comes back, and obviously not only is he just like unconscious, but when he wakes up, he's like nah, I'm just offing myself. I've seen what happens, I've seen what's out there. And his whole, I thought that he was going to die then. His whole decompression kind of thing is really interesting.
That's an interesting set piece. Yeah, the whole you've got Lawrence Fishburne outside and he's like trying to save him while and you're thinking this guy's fucked. You're like,
I thought he was fucked.
I mean, yes, obviously, I believe that pretty much the second the first bit of that decompression, I'm pretty sure most of your veins would go pop, pop, pop.
I thought his head would just go massive and explode.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was literally just expecting the old bang, like blood to splatter all over, kind of. But what was more interesting that it doesn't quite play out that way. Like again, like the second he goes out into space, you're like, well, you're fucked. You're dead. Like I believe you're meant to. Like if you hit that, I believe it's literally like second. It's like seconds for you to fully freeze.
And it's weird because once he starts the decompression, procedure, he realizes he like comes to and he's like, what the fuck am I doing? Mama Bear, help me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it would be disturbing enough if he was doing it and he was like possessed, but when he's no longer in a trance or possessed or whatever we're calling it, and he's like, oh fuck, it gets really like harrowing.
It does. It makes it really unsettling. Yeah, I do remember that scene like caught me because I think I think that was one of the ones when, although we'd gone through this in suspenseful, as I said, like some of it like plays out quite. For a short film, that was one part I think I remember before that Justin part really got going. I remember I'd kind of dipped a little bit. I think I had dipped my interest a little bit, and then that brought it right back up because I was like, holy shit! Actually, this is this is scary. Like the fact that he is, because he's quite an innocent character as well. Like from what we get of him, obviously he's not one of the main like kind of one that's kind of thrown to the front. But from what we get from him, he just seems so innocent and like kind of caught out that when this is happening, you're just like, holy shit, what would you do in that situation? Like here comes Lawrence Fishburne to the rescue, but like diving on through space, just like fuck, here I come. Like, I could just dive through space like this.
I love it. Well, we get that later on as well, don't we? When Cooper just
flung out into space, basically. You're just like off into gravity.
Yeah.
About to meet Sandra Bullock.
But after that, we get, we find out a little bit more about Lawrence Fishburne and his whole kind of story.
Yeah.
And then that's when we find the translation was a mistake and it saved yourself from hell. And then we see the amazing captain's log where they're all just fucking each other.
Yeah. It goes from like a normal kind of captain's log, like this is what's going on.
Yeah, we're about to hit the gravity drive.
And then it just flicks suddenly, and it's just like a fucking bloody orgy of madness. It's
class.
It looked amazing. Like that was probably one of the best visuals in the film. But also just what in terms of like body horror, that literally is again. This director could have made a Hellraiser film. This director could have made so many good gothic horrors or bloody gory like horrors. Like that's what I mean. Like these shots are impressive. These are, like I said before, Hellraiser, Evil Dead kind of level of grotesque, kind of fucked up body horror. And the fact that it's also that level between the fact that it's not just these people getting mutilated, because at first you're thinking it's just going to be them getting ripped up or torn apart or something's killing them.
Yeah.
It's the fact that there is like an orgy element to this of almost like mutilating each other. And like it's almost too quick to see exactly what it is. And you kind of, that, again, I know that this is one scene that was definitely cut down quite a bit.
I imagine it would have been.
And it's both sides, because in one way it's quite effective because it's so quick you almost can't see, that your mind almost can't comprehend what just happened.
Yeah.
Which, again, like, although more of it you might want, more of it might make it lose its effect a bit, you know. There's almost a little bit of what's left in your head sometimes is better, in that weird way that you want to be left with a bloody sex orgy in your head of mutilation, but you know what I mean?
It's it's a real fine line between showing too much and, because the more you see of something, the less shocking it kind of gets. So it's a fine balancing act, but I think it's done so well, and it picks up on that Hellraiser and that cosmic horror of like what could make someone do that.
Yeah,
you know, like what the fuck has happened to these people that like they've gone from, because you do get before they do the gravity drive, and they go wherever the event horizon goes before the space-time fold. and then after, like, what did they see in that made them all want to start fucking? And then start mutilating.
Well, that's
each
what I mean.
other, and then cut his eyes out.
Is it playing with your head? Is it possession? Is it some dark? Have they entered a realm of the devil on the other side?
Yeah.
You know, they've got all of these things of. Is it some darker timeline? Is this some truly religious? Like, is this devils or things on the other side? Is it you being possessed by some evil creature that's on the other side of whatever it is we've gone through? You know, it's hard kind of to get the clear answer, which is kind of what makes it better, that it's kind of ominous as to what the fuck.
Yeah.
You know, you do get some kind, but it's that kind of really twists in your head, like, what the hell's going on here? And this is the bit that kind of makes the film more interesting than I was possibly expecting.
Yeah. No, same with me, man. I think after this, they then realise they need to fucking get out.
Get the fuck off the ship, like
and then
Lawrence Fishburne's literally like, fuck this ship.
Fuck. I get it, man. But then we get Sam Neill's like, he says "I am home" line, which is really cool. You know? They try to find out. They try to get everybody out. They're like, we're going home. He's like, I am home. It's like, oh shit! Like,
when he fully goes off the rails.
Yeah, he's fully fucking gone, man.
The face ripping scene is badass.
Yeah.
The face tearing scene when he just fucking goes for it down and pulling it, and you see the skin tearing, and again that's such it's such good body horror that's shown off. Like, it feels like on a good budget as well, like, in that way. Like unlike a lot of these other ones we've talked about, which are much smaller budget, this one felt like it was got a chance to do this gruesome, grotesque horror on a bigger budget. So a lot of the scenes when they go for it really work. Like, I'm sure that this probably isn't the space film that the studio wanted.
No.
He just went, fuck it, I want to make my horror film in the middle of it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the way, you know, you've almost got like at the time you can't quite tell that his eyes have been torn out, but there's a blackness around it, and like a dark, and just the way the skin just goes through, and you just see it tearing through, and the bloody, it's awesome. And it's also, again, not what you expect seeing Sam Neill. I don't know why, but again, I just wasn't expecting to see it go to that level with him.
No.
And therefore, the fact he plays out the rest of the film with that kind of, you know, destroyed kind of face, and like, it just adds an awesome extra layer to this film. It
is. And then I think DJ's death is kind of cool when he's in the med bay, and he's looking for Sam Neill.
Oh yeah.
He gets beaten up, and he ends up getting vivisected, which I imagine would have been
an off-camera
one.
That was the disappointing part. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, that's Jason Isaacs' character.
Yeah, Jason Isaacs.
And the way that he's strung up, and again, it's in such a kind of angels and demons kind of, you know, thing. You know, that classic kind of architecture kind of thing. And that's the only disappointing part about that. It was like, it looks so badass, and yet you can tell there was more there.
Oh yeah,
that's not even cut to the point where I'd be like, oh, maybe it meant to cut off. No, that clearly is cut. Like, you can see there was more that was going to be shown, more that was going to be shown of that. Like, because the shot you get after, obviously, of him like totally strung up and stuff, his body parts kind of mutilated, kind of thing, is. Yeah, I love that shot again. Like, this is the part that I really think I like the space part, but the gothic horror on the ship is just like, it's just a badass blend. It
was really. I think the only time I started to dip, unfortunately, was really towards the end.
I do agree.
Which is weird, because I was really into it, and then once Sam Neill had been, because we get the scene where Cooper's obviously trying to fix the ship. Sam Neill goes on and blows it up, killing Sean Pertwee, rip.
Yeah.
And then Cooper gets blown away, launches himself back onto the ship, and then Sam Neill shoots a harpoon out the window to kind of destroy them all. And I think it was after that where I was kind of like, I started to dip for some reason.
This is the problem, and to be honest, I feel like this is actually a problem of a lot of these space ones. Is the problem of, you can come up with a good, interesting concept, but the third act tends to play out the exact same way. The spaceship's being destroyed.
Yeah.
Whatever you're fighting against, and it all feels very much the same. I started to feel like half the time it felt like Lawrence Fishburne was just running around from different set piece to different set piece and wasn't actually doing a lot.
No.
And this is where at times, like the guy, what's his name? No, not Cooper.
Cooper.
Yeah, the one that comes back.
Yeah, he comes back.
That again, though, there was a very that felt very like pushing the boundary of the cheesiness for me at times. Like that bit just felt out of place for me, to be honest.
It was
like,
a bit
if
cheesy.
he'd been blasted off or killed off kind of thing, that's fine. But when he comes back in that kind of way, that bit felt more out of place with where this film had been going. And yeah, it kind of just felt like all we were getting was lots of scenes of people moving around and not actually much. And again, it didn't feel like we were getting full on. Apart from when we get actually down into the core, and we've got the Lawrence Fishburne, his burning friend that you get to see again, and you get to see Sam Neill's fully there, and he starts to go into the form that we saw at the beginning of the film. Obviously, those bits were interesting, but apart from that, it was basically just like at this point, the crew's dead, and I don't know. This is when it started to feel like, although you've got some great ideas, you don't know where you're going with this.
Yeah, it was just kind of
that's where it loses
running around.
Yeah. And it is the problem with a lot of these kind of films is it's basically, so when are you going to get off the ship and blow it up, basically, or when you're going to basically kill off the monster and then you're going to freeze yourself, and that is what this film does in several different ways.
It
blows up, puts himself back into cryo
sleep,
and it's like, is something else going to happen after cryo sleep? And I'm just trying to think, but I can't think apart from the whole, again, that, when you get to see Sam Neill in his like almost full final form of like fucked up, demon,
proper Hellraiser,
and that kind of, and you've got him versus Lawrence Fishburne,
and they're fighting at the gravity drive.
Yeah, which is all right again, but it's sad that it felt like this film could have gone into a much. I kind of again wish that they'd either allowed, or that it was the intention that this would go into much more of the kind of gothic horror that it wants to be, because at the end it suddenly turns back into just a standard space film. Standard space flick. It comes with a few elements, thrown in there,
but it's very much we need to destroy the ship.
Yeah, we need to destroy this core to stop the demon, to stop all of these monsters and whatever they can do to try and stop it.
I like the idea of, and there are a few moments I do like in the third act. So when we find out that the Event Horizon has been to this like hellish plane and it's come back with sentience, I think that's a cool idea. And there's a scene where I can't remember. I'm trying to play it in my head of who sees it, but I think it's Lawrence Fishburne when he's fighting Sam Neill in his final form, Hellraiser form, and he sees these visions of all of his crew who are who have been it's almost like their souls have been taken by the Event Horizon, and it's like a montage of them being tortured and hating it, but also laughing and stuff like that. And it's a really cool montage. And you see, I don't know if you remember.
I'm picturing something to do with it, but I'm not entirely sure that I remember that exact. I remember a scene that was playing out that weirdly reminded me of something like House on Haunted Hill, kind of where it had all of them in this kind of end of the film kind of form kind of thing.
That's
where
what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I can't remember how he sees it. I think it might be, it might be Sam Neill who shows it to him, but he definitely sees him, and it's not like at the end of House on Haunted Hill, where it's like a big blob that has the faces.
No.
But we do see like, I don't know if the idea is it's supposed to be like the future of the crew, what's happened to the
trapped
souls,
within that world,
within there, or is not sure what it is.
That
but
something's
got them. But and as long as the Event Horizon lasts, they'll remain there, almost like Cenobites when they take someone. It kind of has that vibe to it.
I remember being there, kind of thinking that at the same time that I was like, and not that it needs to have, but I was kind of like a bit like, what is it that this Sam Neill or whatever he becomes?
Yeah.
What is it that they're actually trying to accomplish with this ending, kind of thing? That was the only thing that kind of was losing me. Is like, what is it you're actually trying to?
Yeah.
There's like a wrath of destruction and stuff like that. I don't know if there's meant to be any point, or you're meant to be capturing souls, or I just started to feel a bit like, what is it we're trying to do here? Like, what is the point of this ending in many ways? Like, what are you trying to achieve here, Hellraiser boy? Like, rip off Hellraiser, whatever you are. Because he looks badass.
He looks badass. But I don't know if the idea is that it just keeps sending distress signals.
Yeah, it keeps trying to gather more and more,
which I assume that's what it is.
Yeah, and that's I think that's why I was a bit underwhelmed by what is it we're trying to do here. Like, it felt like it was leading to something bigger or some bigger idea, and it felt like that's why it kind of like implodes and in itself, kind of collapses in itself a little bit.
A little bit.
And again, it's not like it is, but that's where you can see a little bit of the Paul W.S. Anderson we've seen before. It's the fact that, again, we've got some cool visuals, but that maybe don't lead to much, or don't seem to mean much, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, those kind of things that it's not quite as clearly thought out, or things like that. Like, just little bits that make it a little bit collapse in on itself. I'm trying to think of any other key moments that have not really, but I feel like we've hit.
Lawrence Fishburne redeems himself by, sacrificing himself and blowing up the ship. And then they float off in as they do, they float off in cryo sleep. And then they get woken up. Somebody, I think the surviving female, sees
Natasha Richardson and Cooper is alive. Well, I know her actress name
and his character name. She sees Sam Neill as one of the people who save her, and it kind of ends. I mean, but then my kind of thing.
I knew it was going to be one of those. That's exactly what I was expecting. That kind of cheap kind of.
It's still there, but that's one thing that I do kind of. I know that the film didn't do well, but apparently it's been picked up by Amazon to do a series. And the way in which, the thing that kind of makes sense for me if they wanted to carry the story on, is that I forgot that Justin survives. And then
he's still there, isn't he? Yeah.
Once he's put in, the cryo
to heal
the Bacta tank, we don't see him anymore. And I kind of was like, outside, out of mind. But maybe he's still got he went through the gravity drive, so maybe if they were thinking, how do we pick the story up, maybe it's Justin, because he's still seen it, hasn't he?
I mean, I would have assumed it's just a reboot, right? It's just like reimagining of
Horizon. I've heard it's carrying on.
Oh, okay. I guess
that's what I've heard. I mean, it's all gone. It went quiet a few years ago, but that's what I heard.
But if it's still going ahead, then
yeah, we'll find out. But I will take have you got anything else to add before we go over to the social media lounge?
We'll do a little wrap up, but do social media lounge first.
Yeah,
hit that.
And then we'll get on to the question of: do you think it is must-see horror?
Yes,
because I think that's what the segment is. So it's worth.
We've said it with the others, so we will hit on that.
It's worth bringing it out.
I've got my answer.
So, as always, we always go to the social media lounge, and this is my chance to also say that if you haven't. Hit the subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast, where we put up more often than not, the films that we're going to be talking about, and we get a bit of feedback. And Event Horizon popped. So we'll start off with, I know listener of the show, Foxy, at gfox_1. It's a brilliant cosmic horror movie with a great cast, awesome concept and striking imagery. It's one of my fave movies. Just a shame we'll never get the gruesome extra 30 minutes that got cut. And I didn't know this, but the deteriorated reel was found in a salt mine in Transylvania. Which is really weird, isn't it?
Transylvania? Who was hiding that away?
Yeah, in a salt mine in Transylvania. But I know Foxy's a fan of the show, so I hope you've enjoyed this. Bob Scott is one of my favourites. Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill are great. Flicks and Friends podcast, just straight up banger. And then Andrew P. Watson, an awesomely entertaining film, and you won't need eyes to watch it. I like that there. And then a couple of the negative ones. So Rictus Grin said, this falls under the category of everybody loves it except me. So much potential that it's squandered on cheap scares and lackluster writing. And that, I'm assuming all of the cut footage is from studio tampering. Event Horizon feels incomplete, like it's missing something crucial, which we have kind of discussed.
Yeah.
And then Jim Partridge, it's a mixed bag. Transposing the haunting to a spaceship is a neat idea, but we lack the Eleanor character to take us through. Sam Neill is that character, but he's not our protagonist, so we lose the feeling of getting lost inside the belly of the house/ship. So, mostly positive, but I was interested to pick up on some people who weren't as much of a fan of it. I definitely get the kind of the mixed feelings with this film, and I can feel it in many different ways. It could, and in many ways, it could be because I was coming into this film with such low expectations because of the director. The cast is what made me raise my expectations, because I didn't believe that cast would jump into a bad film. So many of them would be like, we're going to go for the shit ride. I didn't think that would be the case. I mean, I do think it's an enjoyable graphic horror sci-fi. I wish it had more time for that graphic horror kind of side to things. And I think an extra 10 minutes of horror scenes on the old crew and the new crew, even an extra 10 minutes, I think would have added an extra layer to it, not necessarily half an hour. I don't know if this would have held up for an extra half an hour for the whole thing. I feel like it would have gone too far. But I definitely wanted more of the kind of, a bit of the more idea of the old crew, a little bit more time with the new crew to get to go through their kind of what's going on in their head and play out some of their kind of mind games a little bit more. I think would have raised it, because I feel like it starts off feeling really a bit of tension, suspenseful. I feel like it dips a lot for me in the middle. It comes back up because that's less because of suspense and more because of it starts to become more of the action film, where it kind of can't decide if it wants to be the Alien slow kind of builds horror film, or it wants to be Aliens action film. And we can't sometimes feel like we've got the two spliced together, but not in the best way at times. And it kind of builds back up to that, and I just think you need a little bit more of that. That's kind of my sum. So you do yours, and then I'll talk about must-see horror. Well, no, I think to summarise, I think, like you said, it's got some great casting, and for the most part, I think it's pretty well written. It's pretty well shot. And the first two acts, I think, are fantastic. For me, it's when the film tries to get towards its conclusion that it almost struggles to fit into that sci-fi box of, well, we're just going to destroy the ship and beat the monster, and then go into cryo sleep. So my attention did kind of dip out towards the end, but in general, I think it's a really strong film. I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. I think it's a shame that it was cut. It does suffer a little bit with, like you said, maybe a crucial element missing, or a few cuts here and there where you could tell there was more, but they cut it early. But overall, I think it's a really strong film.
It adds to that. The cuts add to the patchwork feeling. So me coming into the I guess thinking about the must-see horror, so thinking about the ones that we've watched so far, I feel like a lot of the ones we've watched so far were all original horror. Original ideas, original concepts. And the only thing that holds me back here, because this is meant to be a list of the 100 greatest horror films or whatever. Some of them, as we said, we're going to have mixed opinions on whether that really belongs in that kind of state. And as much as I do think that this is a good horror film, I don't think it's a great horror film. I think it's a patchwork of ideas of lots of other horror films stitched together into one film. It's Aliens meets Hellraiser. It's it's the ideas of lots of other people that they've stitched together to make one film, which kind of works for the most part. And maybe if we'd got the full version, it would be stronger. But if I'm saying that, do I think that this is an absolute that you should see this, as in this is like 100 horrors to see before you die, must see horror? I wouldn't say it's must see. I would say it's good. It's a good horror film. It works well for what it is. I feel like maybe my expectations are raised by such a low expectation from the director. But it's definitely, I think, it's the first one that I would say that it would be on the boundary between. I can see why some people are negative about it, and I can see why positive. I like it, but it definitely dipped at points for me, which I don't think the other ones that we've watched so far have. And I just think it falls slightly into that more. I wouldn't put it in a list of the greatest horror films ever made, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's must see.
Fair
in
enough.
that way. How about you? Anything?
I'm unsure because, like you said, yeah, because I think the first 2 acts are so good, and they are really strong. There are elements of, there are some cliches, but cliches are there because the people like them, and overall they're successful. There is a dip in the third act, and I do think it, like I said, when it tries to get to the end, it does run into a bit of how do we wrap this up? It's not cliche again. Must see horror. That's the thing. I don't know. I'm kind of like, I'm struggling to say yes, because I feel like I need to maybe expand my horizons a little bit, and instead of being like, oh well, that's a bona fide classic, we all know that, it must see horror. Like, there are some films that you can't dispute a must see horror. So I'm trying to think, if I had 100, if I had a list of 100 must see horror films, would this get in there? It might get into somewhere between 90 to 100 maybe, and particularly with some of that footage that was lost. So I'm at the moment, I'm saying I would probably put it in must see horror, but I don't think I wouldn't put it very high. I'd put it, if we launch our own Cast Me to Hell streaming service, and we do a countdown of the top 100 horrors, maybe between 95 and 100. Event Horizon will pop up, and I'll be talking, and then a couple of other people will be talking. Oh, that scene was awesome, that kind of thing. And that's where I would put it.
It is a hard one to say, and seeing the other ones on the poster, I think there'll be plenty of ones that will be disputing as to whether they actually deserve that place as such a high, bold statement as saying it
is.
Because right now it's going under the influence that this is like the 100 greatest horror films of all time, and I know for a fact already that there are certain ones on there, or even ones where we'll dispute the fact that even maybe in some cases the original is the best of all of the films, but most of the time it's the original that's on the poster. Some of them we probably think the sequels are better than the original, so it's going to go back and forth. But I think that's why with this one I just don't feel confident enough to say that I would say that this is one of the best for me. So I'm putting it as this is my first not must see. Not must see. And it's conflicting because it's an enjoyable film. I'm not saying it's a bad film, but I'd also say if someone never saw this film, it's not really going to unchange their horror world kind of thing. Whereas, some of the other ones, I feel like you should have seen them.
Well, I think that is the first must see horror that we've disagreed on. But we are gentlemen here, and we will disagree respectfully whilst the mic is on. Then after we will fight.
Afterwards we will fight bare naked,
stripped to the waist, as our forefathers did.
Absolutely. Rob will get pistol whipped.
Well, as always, if you've enjoyed the show, hit that subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review. Come and let us know what you thought of Event Horizon. Let us know whether you're hashtag Team EPO and it is must see horror, or
no, it's not must see horror. How dare you?
Or hashtag Team Bobby if it is must see horror. Hashtag Team EPO for no. Hashtag Team Bobby for yes.
And are you Team W.S. Anderson for the best director, or Thomas Anderson for the best director?
And we will see you in a week. Farewell and goodbye.